everybody, and welcome to the 19th episode of the Sharper Edge podcast with Betty Parker. I am so happy that you have decided to stop by and to take a listen yet again this week on the topic that we're going to deal with today that has to deal with people issues. And this one's all about how to have tough conversations. Now, I know in my last episode, I said that we would be doing part 3 of our DEI series, which is what my full intention was. However, I got my wires all crossed. So my guest is actually not going to be here until next week. And that's cool. So we'll put this week to good use because I had already planned to do this topic. We're just going to switch the dates. And this one's all about how to have tough conversations. If you're going to have people issues, which we all are, not by choice, but they just happen, how do we talk through those issues in the most effective way? And people have to get accustomed to doing the awkward things, to feeling uncomfortable because the conversation is tough. Sometimes we have to be honest with people, and that honesty and that truth is painful for the other side, maybe even for ourselves. Sometimes we're not the very assertive types, and we want to avoid all the defensiveness that can come from people who get upset when you try to offer instruction or feedback and try to get them to be held accountable for their behaviors. So it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that at work. If you're in a leadership position, that's the hard part of being a manager or supervisor or higher up the ranks, because you are ultimately responsible for the people who are downline. And if they are giving you pushback and you're trying to get them to perform better, but you just can't get them to cooperate, it puts you in that awkward position of having to tell them about it. And we don't always know how the other side is going to receive feedback. So there's a lot that goes into consideration when we are trying to have these tough conversations with people, especially if the people tend to be difficult. The conversations on their own can be difficult, right? They're difficult conversations and there are difficult people. And they both contribute to whether a situation is going to get resolved or if the matter is going to be heard in the most respectful way and then fixed. But when people aren't willing to be cooperative, it makes it difficult for the person who has the unenviable task of coming before that individual and correcting them. So today, I'm hoping that I can offer you at least 3 things that you can do to make that situation just a little bit better for yourself and the person or people you have to address. So let's hop to it. First things first. If you are going to have a difficult conversation where you have time to prepare, okay, so let's just say we have to go and give an evaluation to somebody. This is in a work environment. It's evaluation time. This is an underperformer. And so you go through all the formalities, but you really have to give this person some tough feedback and maybe even some consequences related to their performance if it doesn't improve. Now, this person has proven over and over again in the past when you've tried to coach them throughout the months or the year leading up to evaluation time, they tend to become a little bit defensive. We see that happen quite a bit. For whatever reason, people aren't always able to receive tough feedback. People aren't always able to hear less than glowing information about themselves. Now, I have to say there are people who are eager for feedback, and I'm grateful to those people. They say, hey, if I messed up, just let me know. I want to get better. If you have folks like that on your team, please, by all means, give them feedback frequently, help them to get better. They're motivated. They will make your job better. They will make you look better. They will make your team better. They will perform. They will outperform in a lot of ways. So when you got somebody motivated like that, you make sure you do everything within your power to help them, coach them. You got to be the coach as the leader as coach, because that's a big part of leadership, coaching people and mentoring people on the job so that they become better. Part of your responsibility is to grow people in their careers, find out what their aspirations are within the organization. Do they want to move up the ladder? Are they comfortable where they are? If they're comfortable where they are, how do you help them to grow in place? People don't want to become stagnant. They get tired of the routine, yet they want to learn more and do more. And they don't necessarily have to be promoted up the ladder to do that. So there's so many opportunities there, and those are your best employees, and those are the ones where you should be pouring more of your time, effort, and energy into them instead of getting distracted and sidetracked by those who don't want to do better. They tend to be people who just take you away from the focus of what needs to happen. They take so much more time and energy and effort. They make you lose sleep a little bit sometimes at night. You get weary of trying to get them to perform better, yet we don't know how to have the tough conversations to get them to change their behavior. And it's even more awkward to have to let somebody go. So, if you have the benefit of preparing for a tough conversation with somebody who's like that, then here's what you can do. First of all, there's the setting. A lot of times people feel uncomfortable if the setting is very sterile, very clinical, very authoritative. If it's not a friendly environment, a less intimidating environment, people will come in defensive already. So nobody wants to feel like they're being called into the principal's office. And we have to think about, have we set up the place that we're going to be in to appear that way? Now, if you are in a position of power, if this is one of your subordinates, if this is one of the people downline who you are responsible for, it may feel a lot like there's some type of punishment associated with coming to talk to you. You don't want to intimidate your people to a point where they don't feel that they can be open and interact with you in a fair and honest way. So the environment speaks volumes as well. I would recommend you have a place to have these meetings where there are few interruptions and preferably none at all. You know how it is in your office. If you're in a hubbub kind of environment at work where there's a lot of activity and people are accustomed to just knocking on your door, sometimes not waiting for you to respond, but just walking in, or even if they're a little bit more respectful, but they're just knocking on the door. Even if you have a sign that says meeting in progress, they still feel like they can bug you, right? So if you constantly have interruptions when you're trying to have a difficult conversation, this can really derail the conversation and the intent behind it and really put people in, an uncomfortable position. So you want to go somewhere where there are fewer interruptions. The setup of the room makes a difference as well. So are you going to sit behind a desk and they sit on the other side of the desk and it looks like truly they're being called to the principal's office? Or do you set it up in a more casual way, yet business like? And by the way, I'm talking about all this stuff from a business perspective, but I'm going to talk about it from a personal perspective as well. But let's stick with the work environment. So you could have a place where there's a chair on this side of you and you're sitting in this chair. Maybe there's a coffee table in the middle. That's much more casual than a desk that sits as a barrier and you're on this side high and lifted up because you are in a position of leadership and your subordinate feels, diminished in a sense in the room. Even though both of you are full-fledged adults, that person might be someone who's been with the company for a very long period of time, have lots of years of experience behind them, and for whatever reason, they're sitting before you right now because something has occurred. So we don't want it to appear that we're devaluing a person or making them feel less than just because they're being called before you to have a tough conversation. So the setup of the environment makes all the difference in the world. Less intimidating, a little bit more casual, yet professional. Okay, so the room is set up. We're not going to be disturbed, and the person is sitting across from you. If you've had your time to prepare as well as you should have, then you can come to that person and kind of lay a few ground rules before you get started, because those ground rules are going to come into effect a little bit later on if they're broken. Let's say you've had a run in with this individual before. You know that they can be tough because they always want to be heard. They feel like they got to get their side of the story out first. They aren't doing a great job of listening to you. They just want to be able to assert their opinions and how they see things. And you can tell they're pretty shut off from any outside perspectives. So they tend to interrupt quite a bit when you are trying to share with them what's going on and what your expectations are. So out of the gate, you've got to let them know how this conversation is going to go. So one of the rules of engagement with somebody like that is to say, hey, listen, before we get started, based on experience from our discussions in the past, I know you sometimes get a little worked up when we have to have tough conversations. What that looks like is you not listening as intently as you should. And as a result, you tend to interrupt quite a bit. I'd like it if we could both hear each other out that we can permit each other to have the space to say what we need to say, that there is actually a dialogue and not a monologue in the conversation, and that we will extend to each other the opportunity to fully express how we feel. Is that okay with you? Now, I don't know how many people would say no to that. So I think we're on pretty good footing with that by just establishing from the beginning that there won't be any interruptions. And so the way you present that information to them will either have them nod in their heads, yes, okay, I can get behind that, or that wall's gonna start slowly coming up and they're already on the defensive. So you don't go in saying, listen, you tend to interrupt quite a bit when we talk. We're not gonna have that today. Of course, that won't work, right? That's where the defensiveness will come in. Who are you to tell me what to do? I'm an adult just like you are. Yeah, right? So, no, we want to make sure that people feel like there's going to be a fair and even playing field and they will get an opportunity to say what they need to say. Even if they don't really know what this whole meeting is about, they just want to know coming into it, there's going to be fairness in being able to express themselves if that's something they really, really want to do. So you may find that you will set up several different expectations. One might be we're going to be respectful to one another. One or another one could be, as I just mentioned, we're not going to interrupt each other. Another one might be, let's make sure we keep everything we talk about in here confidential. Another might be, let's make sure we're goal oriented in this conversation and we're both striving for the same thing. What would you like to see happen as a result of this? So just make sure, as a caveat, that both of you are in agreement with the rules of engagement. It's not just you saying, hey, here's how everything's going to go. Invite the other side to extend something that they'd like to see happen as well, because maybe you have some really interesting little quirks about you when it comes to having tough conversations as well. Maybe you're the person that's the interrupter. Maybe you're the one who doesn't listen as well. Maybe sometimes you say things that are very judgmental and sets people off. Whatever it is, just be willing to accept from them what they need from you in order for this conversation to go well. Okay, so now you've had the setting just the way it needs to be. You've set up some rules of engagement for yourself, and you've allowed the other side to also share some of the rules of engagement they would like to have. So now the setting is all right for the actual conversation. So when we're preparing for this conversation, you got to be willing to be very direct in these discussions. So often, what I hear from people is there's so much fluff associated with the topic, whatever it is, even if it's a really sensitive topic, it can be hurtful to another person. People don't want to do that part of it. And being direct with a person doesn't mean you have to be rude or hurtful. The truth of the matter may be hurtful enough on its own. And sometimes for folks who really don't know how to be as assertive as they need to, they're so busy trying to sugarcoat it and make it land softly at the feet of the person who is the issue, that by the time all is said and done, the other side doesn't even know that there is an issue. It's been so flowered up, so, been so sugar coated, been made to seem like it's not that big of a deal. The other side doesn't take it as that big of a deal. So they end up leaving and going back and repeating the same behaviors that was the purpose for this meeting in the first place. And the person who was having the meeting with them can't seem to understand. I just had this meeting with them and they just went back and did the same thing all over again. Well, were you clear enough? Did they even see it as a problem? Because if we're really soft pedaling these things, you're going to make it confusing for the other side to even know what they should be improving upon. So you got to be willing to just go straight to the point, get to the core of it, get rid of all of the extraneous stuff, and tell people what the real issues are. So, what is tact? Well, tact is just about being thoughtful about what you say, your tone, your word choices, all of those things that make a conversation effective, especially when dealing with difficult matters. It's about being more sensitive to how your words are going to land on the other side and making sure that you're thoughtful about that. Doesn't mean you take away the truth from the matter, but you choose how you're going to say it in such a way that it doesn't make a person feel like that they're under attack and they have to come back and defend themselves. So using diplomacy means just being thoughtful, being fair in the way that you present the information, but still dealing in the truth. And so if you do that the right way, people will be able to hear you. They don't see you as somebody who is making themselves an enemy, but somebody who really does have their best interest in mind and wants to ultimately reach the goal, which is for you to be satisfied with the outcome and for them to be satisfied with the outcome so that the overall work and whatever the picture is that is trying to be painted in this actually gets done in the most effective and the best way in terms of performance. So, as a scenario, let's say that I am a chief nursing officer at a hospital, and there is a nurse downline who reports directly to me. And I've gotten some kind of complaint from a patient, maybe two or three patients of hers, that are complaining about her bedside manner. All right. She's a little gruff with them. They don't feel like she's listening to them. They don't feel like they're even healing well. She's not answering a lot of their questions. Just patient complaints because of the way they feel they're being treated by this nurse. So I have to talk to her about this. Hospitals, kind of hang their hats on scores that come from patient satisfaction surveys. So we can't have that not on my unit, right? So I have to make sure that I pull this person's coattails and have a conversation to get them to thinking about how they are treating their patients. So I'm going to bring this person into my office. Certainly won't correct this individual on the floor in front of patients or even in front of their coworkers. So I bring them into my office. I have established as part of the culture in the office that we respect each other's time and space. So when I'm in my office and my door is closed and my sign says meeting in progress, nobody knocks on the door. So this is a good place. My office is not that big, so I don't have the benefit of, a sofa and chairs. I just have my desk and a couple of chairs seated in front of my desk. Well, I still don't want the desk to be a barrier. So I'm going to come from around my desk, and this person and I are going to sit across from each other. So maybe we're, positioned sideways. They're in a chair here and I'm in a chair there, and we're faced each other and we're talking. I'd rather a shoulder to shoulder conversation versus a big desk in front of somebody and it seems to be punitive coming out of the gate. So if I'm going to have this conversation and I want to establish the ground rules or the rules of engagement between us, and I know the history that I have with this individual, and they can be a little defensive at times, then I'm going to use the tactics that I mentioned to you a little bit earlier. So I may say something like, this is a very important conversation and can be a little bit sensitive because it has a lot to do with your work performance and how patients feel they're being treated. So before we hop into it, I know that this can sting a little bit. And sometimes when things sting a little bit, I notice that you tend to want to justify your behavior or offer explanations. I'm going to ask you to refrain from doing that and just hear me out first. And then, of course, you'll have your opportunity to share your side of the story. But I think sometimes when you don't get the full story, then you may be defending yourself a little bit too early. Can we agree that you'll allow me to finish with some of the concerns that have been expressed? And I'll be happy to hear from you after I've had a chance to speak. And so, I would say something to that effect, right? Okay, so if that's the case then, and let's say they agree to it, then I have to launch into the conversation. And so I'll say something like, over the past couple of days, I've had at least 3 patient complaints that have common themes through them. One in particular being sometimes your tone with them can be a little short or sharp. They are, of course, are not feeling their best. So patients can sometimes be a little bit difficult to deal with too, because we're catching people on sometimes their worst days. So it's not about us, it's about them as a patient. Have you felt any kind of pushback, or have you noticed any nonverbal cues through patients' behaviors that suggest to you something you may have said or done may have been a little off-putting to them? Can you recall anything in dealing with the past couple of days with patients who you feel may have mistreated you? And the reason why I would ask a question like that is because if we are in tune to how people are responding to us, uh, a person who has made somebody mad will know if they made somebody mad most often. Even if the person doesn't verbalize it, it might be a look on their face. They sit back, maybe they're bristling, maybe they're short with their responses back. And so Often if a person isn't self-aware, they'd be quick to say that person was mean to me. But if I'm talking to this nurse, my little fake nurse that I got here in the scenario, and it's three patients that have said the same thing about this nurse, then it can't be all of those patients. They're not all in the same room. They are having different encounters. This nurse is having different encounters with different people, but all of the people are experiencing this nurse the same way. So it can't be all of the patients. That nurse has contributed something. Does that nurse lack self-awareness and doesn't realize that it's something they're saying or doing that's putting other people on edge? If that's the case, I want that person to recognize that. So I will ask them about situations, and I limit it to the just, the most recent ones. So in the last couple of days, have you encountered patients who you felt mistreated you, basically? Because if that's happening, I would make them stop for a minute and say, well, how many patients have you had with that complaint? Because, I've already told them that at least on three occasions, people have complained about them, the nurse. So if the nurse can locate when those occurrences happened, then we can narrow it down to tell me what you experienced when you encountered this patient. Tell me about the next patient. Tell me about the next patient. And then we can find out where was the nurse's thinking, where was what was going on in their headspace. Even if they can justify each one of those situations, there's going to be some common behavior we can identify together that says maybe you should approach patients in this situation in this way. So, of course, this is just a scenario, but this can be in any work setting. So, as a leader coach or coach leader, because that's what leaders do, you have to coach your people, you have to mentor your people. I have to help that person to just see themselves in certain situations. I'm not coming wagging a finger at them and telling them they're wrong and this has got to stop. And if it doesn't get any better, you're going to get written up, and all of the threats and punishment and intimidation that's often used by leaders to get their people in check. Sometimes it's just bringing awareness and helping people to become a little bit more emotionally intelligent. So, in a situation like the scenario that I just shared with you, that nurse needs to be more thoughtful about how the other person is feeling and how to manage their own feelings while dealing with the feelings of others. They don't have to match energy. They don't have to be rude back to a person who's rude to them. And they have to take into consideration everything that that patient is going through. Okay, so let's use a different scenario. This time we're going to see we're in the nonprofit world, and we have an executive director who is doing phenomenal work and serving the community. They have some paid staff under them, but they have a lot of volunteers. And the volunteers love the work that they do because they're able to serve the community. However, this executive director is becoming more and more difficult to deal with, and the volunteers are starting to feel a little trampled on. So they are getting more and more frustrated because they don't like the way the executive director is handling them. We'll make the executive director a man. He's not mean, but he can be sharp with his tone. He is very inner focus, we'll say. It's more about what he needs and wants and not necessarily enough about what they need in order to get the work done. He's looking at his own performance and he just wants to be this really high performing executive director who gets all of this money and these grants and serves all of these people. He's very driven by numbers and analytics, and it's all related to his leadership. So he's about what he can say in terms of his accomplishments and his goals. And so oftentimes people are feeling like he's all about himself. He's not looking at how the team has done well. He's not looking at how the people out in the community are being helped. He's more just very much, how can he make his resume look great? How can he make his reputation look great? How can he keep himself looking great in front of the board of directors? And the board of directors love all that he's putting out there, but they're starting to get wind of his bad behavior. He's responsible and beholden to them in terms of his performance, and they are responsible to hold him accountable for performing well. They want to make sure their organization looks good in the community too. They don't want their reputation to be besmirched, but those volunteers are starting to leave. They're getting upset and they're sharing it out in the community. So the board has heard about it and they have to have a conversation with the executive director about his behavior. So they will likely have a conversation with him and bring him in and talk to him about what they are hearing. So that conversation should include all the things that we talked about. So first I said that we have to make sure the setting is right. Okay, so we have to make sure that wherever we have this conversation with the executive director, it is non-threatening. We also have to make sure, the second thing I said, that we lay the ground rules for what needs to happen in this conversation. And the third thing I want to say, in terms of once you've established the ground rules and you talk about what's happening, I said get to the point. But I also want to add to this whole scenario. Once you get to the point about what you're talking about, the way to get there is to make sure that we even create through our words uh, some cushion where we can start off in the right tone. The tone and temper of this conversation is going to go as it goes based on how you started. So even though we're trying to get straight to the point, I like to use what we call cushion statements, because what they tend to do, they don't soft pedal anything, but it does find common ground. So finding common ground just basically means if I can get that person in agreement with me about what I'm talking about, then it's more likely that they'll be in agreement with me when I have to tell them the tough stuff about themselves. And so it's something very simple like, executive director, you are a very high performing individual. We've been very pleased with the work that you've been doing thus far. All right. That person's not going to push back on that. In fact, that's what they want. They want us as the board to know that they're doing great work, and they want to have that acknowledged. Okay. So if I can set that as a tone to come in complimentary, because it's true. I'm not blowing smoke. This isn't all fluff. This is true. Because ultimately what we want is for that behavior to continue in terms of the outcomes. What we don't want is, and so this can be part of the conversation too, right? So once I got them saying yes, the next uh, verbiage I could use is, well, that's the kind of performance we want to continue to have from you. What we don't want is complaints from volunteers about the way they feel they're being treated. And I'm sure you don't want that as well. Yet we are getting them. So we need to talk today about some of the ways people are feeling like they're being treated as they volunteer, as they give their time, their very valuable time, to the work that our organization is doing and that you are leading. And unfortunately, we're getting some complaints that's causing some volunteers to want to leave. And we've noted, if y'all got these numbers, and we noted that we've already lost 5 in the last month. So it's important that we have this conversation, don't you think? Get yes on that. So then we move into the other parts of that. So those 3 things I would highly recommend just to get the conversation up and rolling. It's absolutely necessary when you're having these tough conversations that you are creating a space and a place where the other side, no matter what their behavior is normally like, that it will calm the situation before it can get out of control. It will open up a door for that person to try to walk in without a chip on their shoulder. It will highlight, if that person does come in with that chip and is ready to do battle, it will highlight and absolutely make them look like the one who is out of control and hysterical if they are not willing to manage their own emotions in the moment. Because as long as you have set the tone and the pace of this, and you are keeping your cool, and you are establishing, how this conversation is going to go in the very best way possible, you can only control your side of the conversation, as we well know. But if they're the ones that are kind of coming out of the bag on it, this is why we have to have the rules of engagement. Because if they do, the things that they're likely to do, and we have established early on that that won't occur, the part about setting up those rules is making sure that both sides are in agreement about what the rules of engagement are. If at any point either side violates those rules, we can call it out. So let's say this executive director, we'll stick with him since we've been talking about him. If we know that he can get defensive as well, because that's generally what most people struggle with when they're having difficult conversations, the defensiveness of the other side. If that person gets defensive, we can say, hey, listen, when we set up our rules of engagement, one of the things you said was that you would hear us out, that you would try to listen objectively to what we're saying, that you won't take it personally. but that you'll try to hear from us. Yet here we are. You're getting angry. We can see it in your face. We're hearing the shakiness in your voice. You're doing everything but pounding the table at this time. You're being, you're interrupting this conversation. We're not able to have a reasonable conversation. Do we need to take a break? Something along that line, but you can call them out because they were in agreement that they weren't going to act that way. And when they violate that agreement, then they're making it difficult for you all to have a conversation going forward. And that rests solely on them. And so once we created that kind of those kinds of guidelines and rules around how things are going to go, it is up to both sides to honor what they committed to. Okay, so I hope you were able to really think about what I'm saying and roll that around in your mind. And hey, go ahead and take some time to process it. Those are 3 tips and tools I try to give in my conflict classes. As I mentioned earlier, I hope you'll find them practical and useful to you as well. Drop in the comment section how you think you could apply them if you're already doing them. Is there something more that could be done that you use that might be helpful? We're all here to learn from one another. So I would appreciate any of your input. And I just thank you as usual for stopping by and listening. And I just hope you'll continue to come by and to share. Please make sure that you continue to share this information with anybody. I know I don't often get a chance to do that and to tell you about it, but I'm going to put my little like and subscribe button up here so you can go out and like and subscribe to all of my platforms. I am on Facebook in 2 places. I am on Instagram in 2 places. I am on YouTube. I am on LinkedIn and all of the various platforms. So I hope you'll join me on all of those because I try to put different content on each one of those. And I just hope you'll share me and everything that you hear with everybody else too, so that they too can learn of me and of these hopefully very resourceful tips and information, just like you. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.